The decision came down like a hammer blow. On a crisp morning in Washington, the announcement was made: steep tariffs on all Chinese-made goods arriving by sea. The goal was to curb China's economic dominance and protect American industries. The logic was simple: make Chinese goods more expensive, and Americans would turn to domestic alternatives. But global trade is a complex web. One move can send shockwaves everywhere. Instead of a manufacturing boom, chaos erupted. Shipping lines scrambled, contracts were questioned, and logistics lost their rhythm. The tariffs, meant as a precise strike, acted like a blunt instrument. Ports like Long Beach and Los Angeles felt the impact immediately. For dock workers and truck drivers, the policy wasn't abstract. It threatened their livelihoods. Shipping costs soared overnight, not just from tariffs, but from uncertainty. Insurance premiums rose, logistics companies added risk surcharges. Businesses relying on Chinese components faced a dilemma: absorb costs or scramble for new suppliers. The intended target was China, but the first casualties were at home. The policy, meant as a shield, started to feel like a self-inflicted wound. The world watched, uncertain of what would come next. In Washington, the move was seen as a necessary confrontation, a pushback against years of perceived unfair play by China. But on the ground, the reality was far messier. The ripple effect was immediate and severe. American companies faced tough choices, and consumers braced for higher prices. The global supply chain, once seamless, was now fractured. The tariffs were more than an economic tool, they were a geopolitical gambit. Yet, the fallout was swift and widespread. The promise of revitalized American manufacturing remained unfulfilled. Instead, the pain was felt in empty docks and anxious communities. Beijing didn't panic, it pivoted. With the US market closing, China rerouted its vast export machine toward Europe. This was no improvisation, it was the activation of a long-term plan. Years of investment in the Belt and Road Initiative had built the infrastructure and relationships needed. Massive container ships, once bound for California, now headed for Rotterdam, Hamburg, and the UK. The scale was staggering. Shipping analysts saw trans-Pacific routes decline as Asia-Europe lanes surged. China offered European importers discounts and favorable terms, making the pivot irresistible. This wasn't just a workaround, it was a strategic masterstroke. The move deepened China's ties with the EU and UK, accelerating the creation of a Eurasian economic bloc. While Washington built walls, Beijing built bridges. The tariffs, meant to isolate China, pushed it to strengthen alliances elsewhere. Europe became the new gateway for Chinese goods. The global trade map was redrawn almost overnight. China's flexibility blunted the impact of US tariffs. The gamble was risky, but it was paying off. The world's economic center of gravity was shifting. On England's Suffolk coast, the port of Felixstowe buzzed with new energy. Redirected Chinese cargo brought a hiring boom and filled warehouses to capacity. Across Europe, ports like Rotterdam and Hamburg experienced similar surges. Modern infrastructure and deep-water access let them absorb the influx with ease. Governments streamlined customs, turning the American crisis into a European opportunity. Meanwhile, at Long Beach, California, silence replaced the usual bustle. Ships vanished, container yards emptied, and the local economy sputtered. Promised manufacturing jobs didn't materialize. Workers faced layoffs, and the entire port ecosystem suffered. Cafes, logistics firms, and trucking companies all felt the chill. The contrast was stark. Felixstowe thrived, Long Beach declined. The law of unintended consequences played out in real time. Europe's ports seized the moment, while American ports counted the cost. The trade war's winners and losers were clear. For some, it was a golden ticket. For others, a devastating blow. The global supply chain had found a new route. European leaders saw the US-China trade dispute as an opening, not a threat. Years of investment and relationship building paid off as Chinese cargo arrived. Ports like Felixstowe and Rotterdam, equipped with automation and expansion, absorbed the surge without gridlock. Their efficiency became a major selling point. Time is money in global shipping. In contrast, many US ports struggled with underinvestment and complex regulations. The tariffs exposed these weaknesses, driving business away instead of sparking a renaissance. European ports hired. American ports discussed layoffs. The American strategy backfired, creating the pain it aimed to prevent. Europe's long game, modern infrastructure, and flexible trade won out. The UK and EU became the new gateways for Asian goods. The advantage was about more than geography, it was about strategy and preparation. Europe's pragmatic approach paid dividends. The global economy rewarded those ready for change. The tariffs didn't just reroute ships, they accelerated a deeper shift in global economics. The BRICS alliance, now expanded, emerged as a counterweight to Western dominance. US tariffs and dollar-based policy were a wake-up call for many nations. De-dollarization became reality as BRICS countries settled trades in local currencies. This reduced global demand for the US dollar, weakening its influence. The expanded BRICS bloc created a vast, integrated market less reliant on the West. China, at the center, used its Belt and Road Initiative to build both infrastructure and financial systems. The tariffs, meant to isolate China, gave it a powerful argument to attract new partners. The rise of non-dollar transactions challenged America's geopolitical leverage. The world's economic fate was no longer determined solely in Washington. The trade war was a catalyst for a multipolar order. Many rising economies chose a path away from the old, unipolar system. The global balance of power was shifting fast. For millions of Americans, the tariffs' impact was immediate and painful. Major ports like Los Angeles became shadows of their former selves. Local businesses lost customers overnight as shipping dried up. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union reported dramatic cuts in work hours. Thousands of stable middle-class jobs vanished. The shockwave hit truck drivers, warehouse workers, and logistics staff. Small businesses built on trans-Pacific trade couldn't adapt fast enough. Costs soared, profit margins vanished, and many closed their doors. The policy, meant to protect American jobs, did the opposite for many. The promised manufacturing resurgence was slow, but job losses were swift. Communities dependent on ports suffered deeply. The cost of the trade war was measured in lost jobs and shuttered businesses. The pain was real, and the recovery uncertain. Global corporations adapted quickly to the new reality. The era of single, China-centered supply chains was over. Resilience and diversification became the new mantra. China Plus One strategies spread. Companies built backup supply chains in Vietnam, Mexico, India, and Eastern Europe. This created a more complex, robust global network. Trade routes diversified, with regional connections booming. Companies invested in technology and local expertise to manage the new complexity. For American firms, the adjustment was costly. Billions spent, higher prices for consumers. The short-term pain was undeniable, even if the long-term strategy made sense. The world's supply chains were remade on the fly. The old playbook was gone. Corporations wrote a new one in real time. The global economy became more fragmented, but also more resilient. Adaptation was the only way forward. The US tariffs and China's pivot marked the end of an era dominated by a single superpower. For decades, the US wrote the rules and the dollar reigned supreme. That world is fading, replaced by competing economic blocs and regional alliances. The US and its allies form one bloc. The EU pursues autonomy. BRICS, led by China, is a powerful third pole. Influence is now distributed, power more contested. Global trade is a network, not a hub and spoke with America at the center. The old tools, like unilateral tariffs, are less effective in a multipolar world. Confrontation can backfire, isolating the US instead of its rivals. Success now requires adaptation, investment, and partnership. The future of trade will be complex, regionalized, and more resilient. The tariffs taught a hard lesson. No country is an island. Strength can reveal weakness. Crisis for one is opportunity for another. The world has changed. Adaptation is the only path forward.